Hi again, FCBC fam. We are here for one more episode of For Creators by Creators. My name is Jess. I am your host, and I am committed to making this a place where content creators, musicians, artists, creative people of any sort can gather, can connect, can hear from the stories of those that have gone before us and have done so successfully, so that hopefully we can find some community, find some connection, and ultimately make the journey towards monetization and protecting our content and scaling our content that much easier and delightful, hopefully. I am excited to introduce today's guest because she has been a friend of mine for quite some time, and she has just the most fun story. Please welcome Bridget Case. Hi, Bridget. How you doing?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a morning for us,
I
hasn't
know.
it?
Oh my gosh. LA though, what can you expect?
What can you expect? For those that don't know, the studio's like smack dab in the middle of Beverly Hills. It's a Friday morning, and you came in from like Orange County.
No one wanted to move for me, but you know what? That's okay.
And
I was
love
like
it.
so close to the studio for like 20 minutes. I'm like, I could get out and walk right now. Why didn't I do
100%.
that? I don't know. But
We just abandoned the car. We don't want this anymore.
yeah, it'd make for great content. So.
It would. The fun part about our connection is that we met literally the last event I'd ever been at right before lockdown.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
March 2020.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Wild. Yeah. I know. I was like thinking back, that was an event, and I think lockdown happened like the week after or something. It was very quick.
It was imminent. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was because I remember looking back maybe a week into lockdown, and I think I realized that luncheon we went to, that ladies' luncheon, was like 2 weeks prior, and already we were in this like doom, gloom, crazy moment with
It's just a complete juxtaposition of what we had experienced together, and like all this positivity and talking about things for the future, and just everything changed.
Everything changed. And we'll get into it. I know that your journey was obviously COVID, I think, impacted everyone's
Big
creator journey.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the nuances of it. But just to give anybody watching that might not already be following you or aware of your story, can you just give us a quick intro into the beginnings of your journey and maybe the earliest days you started putting yourself online?
Oh my gosh. Well, it all kind of happened by accident, I feel like. So I used to be a traditional broadcaster. I was a sports anchor and reporter, so I worked in TV for some years. And when I was in between jobs, I saw that there was this disconnect between the audience and the information. And I always felt like when I was speaking to an audience, the people on the other side like had a voice, like they wanted something to say. And I saw also that like digital media was really blowing up online, and social media specifically. And none of the traditional media was taking advantage of that. Everything was really old school, and it felt like our return on investment with our viewers, our consumers, like it just made no sense. And so it was one of those things where kind of by accident, I thought, well, I'm in between jobs right now. I had a gig lined up and it fell through. And so I had moved back home with my parents just temporarily. And I thought I'd be there for maybe a month or two. 3 years later, then obviously like
We've all been there.
We've all been there. But yeah, so this was the end of 2019. And I just decided, you know what, I'm in between jobs right now. I want to keep my skills up to date. I might as well just start a podcast, because this is when podcasts were really taking off. And I was thinking, well, I love using my interview skills. I miss working in TV. So I'll just, theme it after, it kind of started as a life after sports podcast where I had a bunch of athletes come on and we would talk about that transition into life after sports. But then it grew into something so much more. It grew into a woman in business podcast. It grew into an empowering mental health podcast. And I saw again that there was this like hunger from people online for just more real content and not as much scripted stuff as what I was used to. And I come from the NFL cheerleading world where, we are trained, like we do Toastmasters training, even as hard as we work athletically and physically, we also do a lot of public speaking training, and everything is so PR focused, so based on the script, right? Like everything that you can and can't say about the NFL, about the organization. And so when I transitioned as a journalist, it was kind of the same thing where there were things I could and couldn't say on air. And I always felt a little bit stifled. And felt like there was always some sort of agenda that was being pushed, like the stories that I could and couldn't tell were so controlled by other people. And so when I started having all this freedom to explore these stories that I wanted to tell, it was so exhilarating and just I felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And that's how the podcast started. It just started as a for fun thing that I thought I was doing in between jobs, but it really started to gain some traction. And not that it grew into anything enormous, but I saw that a lot of people were loving it and gaining something from it. And I thought, okay, I have something here. Like I have a voice to share in the digital space. This is where the return on investment actually makes sense. This is where people feel like they can connect with me on the other side instead of just me talking at a teleprompter, me talking at a camera. People on the other side of that camera are able to come in and connect with me personally. And so when COVID happened, a lot changed. I was already hosting another podcast with a friend of mine who's playing the NFL. And so it was very sports focused. But I saw that a lot of sports content online was really video based. And I thought, okay, well, this is my background anyway. I was a traditional reporter, so I'm good at editing. I can use all of my skills. I'm good at writing. I can utilize all these skills to put out video form content on social media. And that's what started to really take off. And I got on TikTok and I got on all the other platforms and I started just loving doing short form content. But as I got on TikTok, I really loved the storytelling, but I felt like I was missing out on the trends, some of the fun things that people were doing during lockdown. And again, lockdown ended up being the biggest blessing for me because it helped me pivot more towards short form content. And I don't think I would have done that necessarily if COVID didn't happen. But yeah, I wanted to get in all the trends. I missed dancing. I was a professional dancer. I cheered in the NFL. I cheered at the University of Oregon. I really wanted to get in on the fun things. And I still was a little bit nervous because like we talked about, I still was so concerned about what people would think because, I'm all about the image and everything needs to make sense for my brand, whatever. So I thought, okay, I really want to get in on these TikTok dances. Why don't I just order some costumes on Amazon and I'll dance online and no one will know it's me. So that's how the sloth began. And
real quick to those that are watching, she has an alter ego on social media.
Yes.
Only sloths.
Yes.
Jamaica, we give it to you hot like a sauna. Well, on the way the time cold, I wanna be keeping you warm. I got the right temperature for shelter you from the storm. Hold on, girl, I got the right tactics to turn you on.
And it has blown up. It's at like what, almost 2 million?
Almost 2 million followers. Yeah.
Since lockdown. Yeah. Because you ordered a batch of costumes off of Amazon.
Right. Like you never know what can happen.
No.
And that's the thing too. I was able to pivot and have multiple things going so that I felt like more fulfilled in my journey. So that I was, still doing sports, but yet I was also having so much fun and I had this outlet for me. And I think we all were experiencing some sort of mental breakdown during COVID. And so this was my way of dealing and also my way of bringing joy to other people. Yeah. And I noticed that it was something that I was like, I have to keep this going because not just for me, but for the people. And it was so fun to start to build that into my brand. And that's something I'm still doing. But I got more into live streaming. And as much as I missed television, I started hosting shows more. So now I host a lot of digital shows. And I think it's been fun always to like be on a set and people figure out that I'm actually the one in the dancing sloth costume. So I'm, doing a serious NFL show or something. And then if I have a break or something, I'll usually bring the costume and dance in the costume on set while I have some time and do something fun like that. And so, it's been a wild journey. And so now I am a full-time content creator and host. And so I host different shows. I do a lot of live streaming on Twitch. I love working with Amazon. And I've had just so many opportunities that have come up because of the sloth, not because of the sloth, because of my sports background and working with the NFL. I think I've just found that saying yes to new things, even if they weren't exactly what I set out for, has been the best thing that I've done so far in my journey.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm kicking myself a little bit because I almost wish that we had the sloth costume and that like I could put it on so you're
Yes. Next time.
So
next
you're
time.
like 2 or 3 of the things you said actually gave me chills, which one of them was you said that you were able to connect with the audience in a new way by kind of taking control
Yep.
of releasing your own thing, utilizing the skills that these other opportunities and career moments had taught you. And also just that you can't remember what the second thing
you're
was
good.
that I had it and then it like that is such a remarkable timeline, right? And it's so funny because again, when we met, you were still in that, I think,
Finding
first
myself.
phase.
Yeah. I was
And
in the
I've
first
just
phase.
loved seeing it evolve. And even just coordinating this interview, like you've definitely built out a team. You even on the way here today, you have a lot of people involved and a lot of people that you've delegated to, and that it's kind of an actual machine, a business of this truly. What were the biggest learning curves for you in figuring out how to get to the point where it's truly turnkey?
I think here's my thing. No one will say this, but I don't think anything in the content creation business is ever turnkey because it's constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to constantly change up your content. You have to constantly change up your machinery.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the same thing with an algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
You have to constantly make sure that you have your finger on the pulse. And so that means that, like, you know, initially I was in the podcast space. I'm not in the podcast space anymore, even though I still love podcasts. But like transitioning into the different kinds of people that I need, that's been the most difficult part. And so I think having like one consistent person, like my assistant, and I hate like saying that, but I think almost every person who is in this business, if it is your full-time job, take a little cut out of your pay and get an assistant. It will change your life. You will just feel this huge weight lifted off of your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And having someone who can handle and help me in so many different ways. So it's not just like, oh shoot, well I had a podcast producer, now they can't do as much for me. Now I need to get somebody else. Like
Mm-hmm.
like having somebody that can manage everybody else
Mm-hmm.
too is a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the minute that I hired Katie, she's unbelievable. And I've
Shout
been with
out
her.
Katie.
Yeah,
Thank
shout
you
out
for all
Katie.
your help.
Always hire a mom. That's the other thing that
Oh,
I would say.
wow.
Always hire a mom because they already know how to get so much done and they will never be intimidated by one more thing.
Wow.
And so it's literally been the best thing. She's got 2 little kids, and I know like she's volunteering at one of her boys' little like run-a-thons this morning, but she's like, you know, send me this, I'll post this while I'm doing that, like they multitask like no, it's nobody's business.
They
It's
multitask
wild.
in their sleep.
Yes, exactly. So get yourself a mom if you are looking for an assistant.
I love that so much.
It's so
We're gonna
good.
clip that
Yeah.
for sure.
Get
Mamas,
yourself
we're
a
coming
mom.
for you.
Because I have hired, you know, young college kids, and everyone else is just lazy compared to moms.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the best thing that I ever have done. And she's been with me for a little over 2 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's changed everything.
Mhm.
So that's when I really learned too that like I needed help.
Yeah.
Because it is scary as a content creator. You want to feel like, well, I can do everything myself.
Mhm.
But, you know, now I'm a homeowner and I have to take care of other things outside of work. You know, like that's another extra job.
Yeah.
And so I think having somebody to just take a little bit of responsibility off of your plate and make sure also that like you get places like her taking care of things so that I can get to this podcast today, so that I can get to my things tomorrow, like whatever it may be. She makes sure all my meetings are set. She takes care of all my emails,
Mhm.
everything. Like
Yeah.
it just, I think that more content creators need to delegate.
Yes.
And find someone that can handle a little bit more responsibility than, you know, just the one thing that they're maybe qualified for. Like people are so teachable these days.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
I mean, like those 2 things have been kind of a cornerstone story arc of these conversations. One, delegation and figuring out how to not have to do everything on your own as a content creator. Because again, the point is that we want to see people get paid. We want to see people have a sustainable career. We want to see them be able to make a living out of their artwork, out of their personality, out of whatever it is that gives them that joy, to your
Yep.
point.
Yep.
That was the other thing
Yeah.
that I was, the second thing that when you had said that you wanted to infuse joy into that dark moment, I had chills.
Yeah.
But then the second thing that came up is being able to pivot and to be teachable, and the fact that there is the library of all of history available at our fingertips, on our phones, on the go. Like there's no excuse anymore to not evolve,
Right.
to not expand if you want to be successful.
Right.
You can chill if you want to chill. Like, I've even found myself having to get myself out of chilling moments.
Oh, I
because I'm
think
like,
we've all
wait,
done it.
I needed the break. I got the break. The break is really yummy, but now I got to get back to work. Right.
Yeah.
And so
I can only tell myself so many times that I'm burnt out.
right? It's like how we're 100%. There's a few questions I have, but one of them based on what you were just saying is this is NFL season, right? And that's like I think one of the
Crazy time.
nucleuses of
Yeah.
your work. So I know that even just, again, finding time for you to come here and have a conversation with us, there was just so many moving pieces. Can you tell us, while you're in your peak season, what does your typical day look like? How do you have to manage it in order to continue having multiple content arms running?
Yeah, I think, again, having an assistant and having somebody post and getting like my sloth content out on all of the platforms while I'm getting prepped for a show, because I do live shows on Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So all of the NFL days, and then a short show during college football games.
Okay.
So and they're long days. Like Sundays are 12-hour live streams. So it's a lot, but I think I have found so much joy in working with FanDuel. I've been with them for over a year now, and they're the best sports book in the business. And I think that's another thing, is a lot of people in the sports space are a little afraid of the sports betting platform. But what I've found is that some of these like newer age companies, they get it. They understand who you are as people. They understand where the disconnect is with traditional media, and they want to like push the boundaries. So I've found that like working with companies like that, it's a little bit easier for me to manage things because they're not expecting the same things of me as when I worked in traditional television. And so there's a little bit more helps, maybe not the right word, but just maybe going back to delegation, or understanding that I have a lot more on my plate because I don't have a huge company of 30 people working for me. So I think there's just it's all about finding the right companies to work with. And I think for me now, being in a place where I only work with two brands, FanDuel and Focus Fuel. Those are my only two brands right now that I work with all year long. So anything else is gravy. So that way I'm not so stressed about chasing down other sponsorships. And it's something that I think it took a while for me to get there, but it makes my day-to-day life during NFL season just so much easier because I'm not stressed about picking up, little sponsorships here and there. And I used to do that, and it would drive me crazy because then I felt like my content would suffer.
Yeah.
So I think also working with FanDuel, they're so amazing because they love to utilize my strengths, and I just love working with them so much. And I am a storyteller.
Yes, you are.
At the core. So being able to exercise that in me is such a blessing. And so knowing, okay, so I work on Thursdays Thursdays are wild, but I know that I have to get this many videos out and over to them by the end of the night as I'm prepping for Thursday night football stuff, as I have a meeting before that, as I do a show. And then Fridays I can kind of regroup for the weekend and get prepped for Sunday. So that's usually what I use my Fridays for. But I basically go off of the NFL schedule. And then whatever shows that Amazon or Twitch bring me, again, is just gravy. And so I'm always like kind of their guinea pig for trying out new concepts online. And it's one of those things where you have to be flexible, but also stand your ground on your schedule.
Yes. Know what your unique composition is, right?
Yeah.
Some people are not morning people. Some people fall apart, me, if you pull an all-nighter when you need to, right? Like my body shuts down. I used to be able to do it every single finals session
I know. Think
in
about
college.
that, right? Yeah.
And now I'm just like, post-COVID, I'm like, no, I am down for the count for 2 weeks if I do one all-nighter. So know your unique body, your mind, what you are, where your psychology leans, and set those boundaries in a way that makes everyone successful.
Right.
And be able to articulate them in a professional and I think grounded way, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm so curious about, I remember in our first conversation about this, was that you achieved the elusive virality that so many people set out in content creation to get. I can't tell you how many business brand meetings I've been in with companies and they're like, how do we get to be viral? And we're like, bro, I mean, there's ways, but like, we can't guarantee this.
No.
It's kind of just a drop in the bucket half the time.
It really is.
And you went through it in that really unique moment in time for us in a sloth suit.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so interesting too, because you have this super dense career of doing so many things as Bridget.
Yeah.
And then you are able to just thrive doing the thing that you love, doing dancing, having joy in a sloth costume.
Yeah.
But one of the things you mentioned to me was you hit, as we said, like 1.7, 1.8 million on TikTok alone, I think, of all the platforms with that account. And yet people tend to think you're making more money from that number than you actually are. Can you help us really understand what it looks like, what monetization looks like relevant to the numbers?
Oh my gosh, it goes so up and down. I mean, when you're going viral, you can get deals, but when you're not and things are a little bit quieter, brands kind of, fade away. And so it all depends on how relevant you are in that moment. But that's something where I always try and tell people, like, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. Even if you're a micro influencer and you have 1,000 followers, if your audience is highly engaged, you can make money. But I think...
Did you hear that at home?
Yes.
You can make money
if you
have
money.
a highly engaged, nimble little audience.
Yes, because those people are there for you. They are showing up for you, no one else, and they just want you to be yourself. They want you to be honest with them, transparent, and that's the best way to, work with a product or work with a company, right? Is if you have that audience that knows you are just uniquely you and you are transparent and you're always going to be honest with them. And so I think with the sloth, it's been a journey because sometimes things are, it's peaks and valleys, right?
Yeah.
Peaks and valleys. And that takes a big toll on me mentally. And because I'm constantly comparing myself to other creators, which comparison is the thief of joy. Like, we all know that, and it's so bad. And that's another huge reason for having some help is I actually take a lot of breaks and don't look at social media. And especially on Instagram, I try not to worry that much about the engagement. I use Instagram basically like it's almost like a website.
Yeah.
Like it's a place for people to go to get your stuff. But I don't stress about how many comments. I don't stress about the negative stuff because I know that I have everything running the best I can on every other platform. And so on TikTok, I think that my journey is unique enough to teach me that I think if I made so much money in the beginning right away that I wouldn't be where I am now. And we all need that big dose of humble pie.
Oh my gosh.
Like, right?
Yes, we do.
It's one of those things where I just think to get spiritual, God's trying to teach me something.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a lesson in this. Yeah, there's a lesson in this. There's a reason I am where I am right now. There's a reason that the sloth account is where it is right now. And there's a reason that people keep coming back for both Bridget and the sloth.
Yeah.
And that is so much bigger than the amount of money that I am making right now. And I'm still able to live. I'm still making a good living, much better than, the average
human in the world today.
So, and I think what's crazy too is so many content creators don't make any money.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that we're trying to demystify here is that like you can actually be visibly successful and make nothing.
Right.
And that oftentimes I would venture to guess might have something to do with your commitment to the work and your ability to get strategic and creative with how you're outreaching, with how you're presenting yourself. There's a way to be passively interesting.
Yep.
And there's a way to be actively lucrative.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And the second thing that you had said was the creative, or the comparison is the thief of joy. I think that that's such a trap that we do get into with social media. And obviously on this show, we want to highlight how these tools can be useful and how they can connect and how they can actually create opportunity, create economy, create futures for people. But it's important that we also highlight that like you have to keep your mental guarded. You have to be strong, and you have to make sure that you are that you're approaching this with that like thick skin of knowing that you're putting yourself out there. But I love how you described, but I'm giving there a limit to how much of this absorbs or sticks to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And not worrying about the followers. Like I even had to go through a time where I was I was, still kind of going through it, but there was a lot of negative energy and just all these fake accounts that were following me because that just happens and or, inappropriate accounts, things that just were weird. And so I have my assistant go through and start removing some of those followers because I'd rather have a highly engaged, safe community.
100%. And that's true for anyone that might be watching this, because one of the things that we've talked about in the previous conversation is that the normal social media user that might not envision themselves a content creator, they have their friends, their family, their colleagues, Joe from high school on their social media. And then along the way, they might have gathered all these tangential people that came in. And there's a way to both realize that you're actually only 5% of your audience is being reached by your content. And there's a way to realize if you want to target people, know the avatar of your audience that you strive for. That's even how we built this show. We had an avatar, which is those of you at home that are creative, want to be creative, have spent time in your life being creative, and have not been able to really earn a living from it. And with you, it's knowing how to prune. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Because it's also healthier as a woman.
Oh my gosh.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
That when you are able to prune out, to trim out those accounts that are just never really gonna help your life or your self-image.
Especially when you're making a transition. Like I transitioned into completely different content. Initially I was putting out this podcast and that's why a lot of people followed me. And then when I transitioned into more short form and live streaming content and more of my hosting gigs, I saw that and especially posting sloth content. Some people were like, I'm not here for this. Bye, unfollow. And it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
But as a woman, you have to take the wins.
Yeah.
And realize that everyone else who says bad, nasty things about you is just jealous. They're just jealous, and especially men. And they just don't know how to deal with the success of somebody also who's happy and bubbly and kind.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Can we talk
and a woman?
Can we talk about how often kindness is viewed as a tool or a strategy?
Right.
But there's people that actually are joyful and actually are kind.
Right.
And
what a concept.
What a concept, guys. You can be kind. Please be kind. You also mentioned the humble pie, right? And to me, in my experience, in my life, observing, I've spent a great deal of my writing career highlighting and actually writing in the voice of executive leaders, people that have dominated or disrupted industries, people that have truly achieved the highest echelon of power and influence. And almost every single one of those people I've worked with that I admire, whose soul and the way they move through their business and they move through the world actually is meaningful and uplifting.
Right.
Every single one of them has been brought to their knees, if not once, dozens of times. When you're a founder of a startup and you're trying to scale, and you have to figure out how to make payroll when you are living in your basement or whatever it might be. The humbling moments, I wish people could recognize that suffering produces so much fruit, and that challenge and difficulty makes you so much more useful to the world, right? And so I love that you touched on that, because I encourage people, flip the perspective, and this is something I actively have been working on for the last 9 months. I've been working to integrate this because it was like a download from God that happened in January, where I was instead of looking at a challenge as though it is trying to fold you and feeling like you're being attacked by your circumstance, look at it as an opportunity to realize I'm about to evolve. I'm about to shed a chrysalis. I am about to become something so much bigger than what I was before this, because this is going to teach me tools. And the main tool is humility.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand that, especially in the content creation realm, it seems to be driven by this idea of ego. For you, it seems to be driven by the work.
It is.
And by the audience and by the connection with them and you love football. You do. And
I love it.
I love a good sports girly because, gosh, I'm trying to be one day. You'll teach me.
I got you.
Thank you. Not that you don't have a full plate, but the fact that you love football so much and you care about people actually being involved and hearing truly, closing that gap that was in traditional broadcasting through the work you're doing. I think that is something that will lend to a very lucrative, sustainable, long-term career.
Yeah.
Right?
And
With a lot of fulfillment.
And I feel that's the thing. The fulfillment comes first and the rest just follows.
Yeah.
The money always comes. That's what I always remind myself of. My mom always says that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's as simple as saying you put good out, good comes to you.
Yeah.
And again, if it comes to you after a few of these storms, after a few of these challenges, if you have to be bankrupt to move in with your parents in your 30s, do it.
Yeah.
Spend the time with your family.
Totally.
We talked
did
about that.
We both have done that.
Yeah.
And it was the best decision I ever made. And it allowed me to save money. It allowed me to make some choices, pivot in my content creation journey.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was pretty early on, but still. And that is the number one thing I always recommend to people. If you can move in with your parents or some family member or somebody to save and follow your dream, do it. Don't be too righteous and prideful.
Yes.
Because I always thought, I think you said the same, I always thought I would never move back in with my parents. Oh my gosh, that means I failed. It's so embarrassing. The best thing I ever did. You know,
100%.
I turned my childhood playroom into my first podcast studio, and then it became my live streaming studio. And you know, I was able to save up enough money over the years that now I bought my house, and now one of my bedrooms is my own studio. So it's like everything works out, and I always recommend moving with your parents if you can.
If you can. And that's the thing is, to your point, there's like maybe a self-righteousness and an ego that prevents us, or a pride that prevents us from taking that step.
Right.
For me, it was like a weird shame. And it wasn't because I was too good to move home. It's because obviously there was this trend of millennials going home after college. And I had just been raised with such an independent spirit. They taught me how to work hard at I worked at a gas station Subway at 14 years old after petitioning my principal of my school that they would allow me to work in California at that age. And those experiences, again, humble pie, grit, and gratitude go so far. And for me, the moment I did move in, it was a gift I was never going to give myself.
Right.
And then when it happened, and when it had to happen, and when it lasted for me, I think it was about a year and a half, and it was this very tangential part of my life, like a Hallmark movie playing out. And I realized I already knew how much I loved my family.
Right.
I realized how much more I loved them today than I've ever known how to love them before. And when you're in your 30s, you start to recognize that like time is not infinite or limitless on earth. And there's only going to be so much time we have with our families.
Right.
And so especially within the world of any career that you are in where you have flexibility of any type, try and spend time with the people that are going to fill your cup without even trying to.
Right.
Right?
Yes. No, exactly. I mean, I never thought I would settle down in Southern California. I've loved moving around different places. And my last job, I worked up in Washington State before I moved back to California. And during COVID and being back home with my family, I realized how much I wanted to be close to them and how much of a privilege it was to spend that time with them. And you just, you never know when that time is going to end. And also, they've been my biggest cheerleaders. They have been the ones who have kept me going. My parents have been the ones who have kept me going in the content creation space. Like,
really?
They have been like championing me. Yeah. So I think being around my parents, they know how hard I work and how hard I want to work, that they're always there to support me emotionally when I'm going through it with whatever it may be. Maybe I don't get a certain gig or I'm upset that a content creator got a certain opportunity that I didn't get. Again, comparison is the thief of joy. But my mom and dad always have something really, really really wise to say. Like, to get me through that. And I realized, oh yeah, this has happened for a reason. You know, this has happened for a reason. Everything in the content creation game that I've experienced has happened for a reason.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so speaking of content creation game, so right now it sounds like you have multiple different shows and ventures happening at once, and you own them all, and you're doing them through these platforms, or any of them officially still with the NFL or...
On my channel, on Twitch, yes, I own the content. And then whenever I'm doing something with FanDuel, they own the content.
Okay.
And then whenever I do a show with Amazon or Twitch hires me and contracts me out to host a show, that is their content. But anything else short form that I put out is my own.
it's also worth noting for those at home that like you can get to the point past just a regular brand deal where they are, as you said, they're actually putting you out into other mediums, channels, audiences, etc., and really being of use. And I think one of the things that's always just radiated out of you is, again, you have an actual love for the niche you've chosen. You have a love for people and for communication, and you work really hard. And you know your stuff and you show up prepared. Like we, just for those that weren't here, we literally just like flew right in to sitting down and having this conversation because traffic was not our friend today. And the fact that you were just so effortlessly composed and articulate, I think that doesn't happen by accident. That takes a good amount of time to practice and to learn. And so one of my pieces of advice for the audience is, if there's something, especially if there's something that scares you that you think you might not be able to do, but it's like a crucial point of what you want to do, just learn.
Yeah.
And just learn in a way that might be private, learn alone in your apartment, study, practice. If it's speaking, like for example, my biggest fear was public speaking.
Right.
My biggest fear was being on camera.
I get it, you're a writer, but still, you're so good at it, and it comes through from your writing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But it's just funny because that was truly my throat would close up in meetings with like 7 people in a conference room. Yeah. And I remembered that last year I had an opportunity to get up on a stage, and at first it was going to be host a panel. Yeah. And then it became, actually want you to MC the event. And this was actually in partnership with Baron Davis. It was his big summits for the NBA All-Star weekend in Salt Lake City last year. And I remember thinking, I don't know sports. I don't know how to lead something on stage, and I want to vomit. And I just remembered that I chose to say yes. Yes. Knowing I was going to be terrified. I showed up blacked out with nerves and anxiety, and it went fine. Yeah. And in the end, I was able to witness, holy crap, you can do this and you can improve. Right. And so to your point, it's just there might be a nugget of natural skill, and a lot of the time natural skill I think is partnered with fear. Right.
Because, oh my gosh, I have so much fear.
Right?
So much.
Like, and how do you overcome that? How, at the earlier days, before maybe you really, because you're so embodied in front of us, were there points where you really had to stretch?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm still stretching. I mean, I've always been very open about my struggles with mental health, and I've always struggled with depression and anxiety. Okay. And I think fear goes hand in hand with that. And there are going to be waves because we can't constantly rely on the winds to tell us that we're doing a good job and to pull us away from the fear. Like fear and anxiety, I think are just that most of my anxiety comes from fear. And what I really tell myself is I always think, what's the worst thing that could happen? If I do this, if I move forward with this, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I always write it out. What am I afraid of? I usually make a little chart. My therapist has helped me with this. I always say what's the fear? What's the worst thing that could happen? But if I do it, what's the best thing that can happen?
Look at us go.
So exactly. So, that helps me every time, even if I'm just driving on my way to something and I'm nervous. And sometimes it happens because a lot of times I'll have shows back to back, and then I might go a little bit of period of time without hosting, and I get nervous when I'm going on a set and I know we don't have rehearsal time or something and I'm just no, I've done this a billion times. Chill out. What nothing. And you know what? If you do mess up, who cares? Is anyone going to die? No. I had a friend of mine, who always told me, she's in PR, and she always used to say, it's PR, not ER.
Yes. So I've heard that too.
Right? It's so good. And so it's, even though I'm not in PR, I always go back to that because no one's going to die. No. It's what's the worst thing that can happen? I always go to that. And that's how I overcome fear. And I also know that whenever I do something I'm fearful of, something good has come from it. And God has always got me. And just remembering that, and he always has a plan. I mean, nothing, how can I not just
try,
go for it and try? Yeah.
And I think to your point, if the answer to the question is what's the worst that can happen, and the answer is embarrassment or failure, I say do it, because there's no level of, obviously you want to be mindful of repercussions if it's a certain kind of embarrassment that you might suffer, and just be willing to make that risk and
Right.
have whatever that loss might be. But if it's just embarrassment of how you might present or how you might handle it, and if it's fear of failure, do it, because failure is better than not doing it.
It's the best teacher. Failure is the best teacher. I have learned so much, and I'm so glad every time I've failed, which happens consistently still, it has been the best teacher. And that's kind of why I started my podcast and got into the content creation game in the first place, was because I felt that I had failed because I wasn't getting the jobs anymore that I wanted, and I knew that I deserved talent-wise. And I thought that, you know, okay, shoot, even if I fail, what's the worst thing that could happen? I might as well just try. And there were a lot of things I failed at early on in the content creation space, and still do. But I know every time I fail, I learn something from it. And it's peaks and valleys.
Again,
Yeah.
be able to roll with the storm. Sometimes the storm can be fun. Ask a surfer.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I've learned so much from surfers, and one of the philosophies that I think that translates to the way I've processed anxiety, because I also struggled severely with anxiety and with OCD and with like ADD interrupting that, right? And then last fall, I candidly suffered pretty deeply with depression. And so this year I've been paying really close attention to my mind and my triggers and all of that stuff. And one of the things that was transformative, that just like, again, a download that just kind of became clear to me after hearing forever many years this philosophy, is that a storm to a surfer is an opportunity to score. It's an opportunity to just go out and do your best work, send it, and never look back. It's an opportunity also to cheer on the other people that are there with you, because surfing is such a unique sport where there's not that competitiveness. You're actually you're in the water just throwing up shakas at the guy that's just doing the best run of his life.
Right.
And I think that there are so many parts of that we can actually adopt in our own lives. Like, how can we look at the storm and as soon as we see it, be like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Let's get through this. Let's do our best
that.
work through it.
Yeah.
Right? So thank you to the surfers in my life that have taught me this.
Oh my gosh.
Because God knows that I'm not a surfer. As a California girl,
Same. No.
it's just not my it's not my skill
No,
set.
it's okay.
And in Utah, I'm trying. One day maybe I'll be a skier.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay, so real quick, going back to your business. So even when we talked yesterday on the phone, this was a scheduled meeting and you were having to eat your like lunch in the middle of the meeting, because what I think one of the things that people also, one of the myths or untruths that people in society assume of content creators is that maybe it's like the more leisurely,
Oh my gosh.
fun,
Yeah.
relaxed, you're just traveling the world, you're just staying at resorts, you're just eating yummy food, you're just putting on your makeup, it's just your skin is flawless. No one understands that if you're seeing someone's content en masse, there is a very good chance that person does not sleep.
No.
They don't sleep on their work, they don't sleep on their learning, they don't sleep on putting out what you're seeing. And so what I'd love, and then the other thing that we talked about was the fact that with that being said, when you do actually take a day off, realizing that you almost never will,
It's never. Yeah.
what is that like for you? Because with a traditional 9-to-5, if you have your PTO allotted for the year and you're able to take that, you're getting paid for that time to be
Right.
away. You likely have some system in place, an out of office message where you're able to just chill and dig in, and you're not losing anything by giving yourself that space to fill your cup. What does it actually feel like as a content creator and as the owner of your content business to try and take a day off?
Oh my gosh, it's nearly impossible. I almost have to do something else to force myself to take the time off of work. Like throw myself into another project or something. And I think that there is this huge stigma that we are all lazy and we must just have these really nice leisurely schedules, which is so not the case.
No.
At all. And anyone who knows me knows that. But I think for me, I've gotten a lot better in the last year at putting up boundaries and telling myself, okay, you are shutting down the computer, put it away, put the phone away, just take a couple hours. Even though whenever I'm watching TV, I'm thinking about content. Like my brain is always on. And so I've gotten really into yoga. I think that helps me a lot. And so the more that I exercise and go do active things, the more it does help me disconnect a little bit. And then I always come back with like a better idea.
Yeah.
But I think the hardest part is, though, if I go on a vacation or something, which is very, very rare, but I have a vacation coming up in November, and I've been really nervous about it because it's like during my super busy time, but it's something I've been planning since February. And so I've just been like planning ahead like crazy, making sure that I'm good to go. I know that I'll probably work on the vacation still anyway, but trusting that it all works out and knowing that if I lose a little money, it's not going to be anything detrimental, but knowing that like I can't do my best and I burn out if I don't take the breaks and don't take the breathers, which is really, really hard. Because especially during football season, I work every day. Like I don't take a day off, but I've gotten into this habit where once football's over, I try and take some breathers and I try to do some fun things. March Madness gets really crazy. And then I, again, try to take some breathers. So I think having that nice schedule where I can build a little bit more me time in is something I'm working towards.
Yes.
I'm not there yet, but knowing that like in this business, it might be scary and you might not make that much money in the beginning. I didn't make very much money the first couple of years, like at all. But I was able to save. I was able to save from my last jobs. And then suddenly things took off and it started clicking. And I think for me, knowing that there's no limit to what I can create, there's no limit to what I can make, everything's just going to go up from here. So, I mean, if that's the case, why can't I take a day off? Why can't I take some time to go on a vacation and disconnect? And so it's something that I'm constantly working towards.
Well, you said yoga is the thing that kind of grounds you. And again, the word that came to my mind as you were saying this was stretching. Like, it's not just about stretching yourself and your capacity to be able to handle all the things at the same time. It's being able to stretch your muscles in the downtime so that it actually 10x's future work.
Right.
Because you have new inspiration, new rest, new creativity, and people it is important to value your rest. It's also worthwhile to mention that you said you didn't monetize for the first few years, but that you stayed with it and that eventually you saw the fruit come through, which is such a valuable lesson. I know that we're kind of running on time, so I want to make sure we get to a few other things. Based on all of the variables and all of the projects you have going right now, what are you most excited about next?
Oh my gosh, shoot. I don't know. There's so many I think taking my sloth content to the next level. I have a new costume coming in. Like now I'm at the point where things are being like custom made and it's very exciting. I think as much as I'm excited for like new shows and other projects, I think that is what I'm most excited for because I'm going to be taking a little bit more chances with my content. So it's not just dances. It's more relatable. I can speak more openly about my mental health because I realize every time I do that, people feel less alone.
Yeah.
And so if I can talk about my journey with depression and anxiety, I can hopefully help someone else out there.
Yeah.
And so by utilizing my platform to do that, that's something I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have all these projects. Where can we find you? What are all of those like sources that we can make sure to tag and let the audience know?
Yeah. Well, bridgetcase.com, if you just go there, it pretty much links all of my socials, but you'll find me on Instagram or TikTok, everywhere. For the sloth content, it's only sloths, ONLYSLOTHS. For Bridget Case content, it's just Bridget Case, just my name. And everything's pretty much connected, especially now with the collab features, so you can't miss it.
You can't miss it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wish we had more time because is there any last takeaway or anything that you'd want to even just speak into the camera and give someone a piece of advice that might be listening that's really been profound in your journey that we haven't touched on yet?
I think more creators need to just trust their instincts, and you need to be able to take that leap of faith without fearing the worst that could happen. And because that's going to happen. We're humans, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that. But I think just being willing to trust yourself. If you want to try something, try it. Because a learning experience always comes out of trying. And I have got so many friends nowadays who I'm so proud of because they have been experimenting and trying new things. And it can be a little scary because people are going to make fun of you, especially if you are a little bit older and you are pivoting. A lot of people are going to make fun of you. And that's happened to me. And just know that something really great is going to come out of it if you stick with it and you detach from the fear and you just push through and try. Trying is like my favorite word because if you try, you are succeeding.
Absolutely. And also with that point about the people that are going to be hating online or negging you or whatever it might be, I truly believe that if your goal in how you show up, however they're finding you, is joy, is connection, is community, or is anything that has a really positive intention to it, there's going to be more people loving on your content than those that are going to hate it.
Absolutely.
Because you just can't hate good things
No.
that much.
Right.
It requires a certain kind of temperament to be able to choose the negative in those moments.
Yeah.
And what you have online is so fun. And I hope that everybody goes and follows her on both of her accounts, and that you're able to continue watching alongside of us and our team as you get through this season and then step into that next kind of chapter with all of your content. Thank you again for being here and for taking the time.
This is such a blast.
This is so fun.
Yeah.
Yay.
I love it.
For those of you at home, thank you again for joining one more episode of For Creators by Creators. We drop new episodes every Wednesday. We work really hard to try and source the right creators for the topics and the use cases and the monetization traps and the algorithmic lockouts, anything that people deal with regularly in the content creation game that prohibits growth and prohibits success. We try and figure out how to capture those stories and demystify them for you. Please feel free to engage and contact us, comment, whatever you need to do to let us know your ideas, your struggles, your suggestions for guests. We'll always read all of those and do what we can to provide. And if you haven't already clicked subscribe, please do so that you can be notified when we drop a new episode on Wednesday mornings. And we'll be back next week with another one for you. So thank you again. Be kind to yourselves, and we'll see you next time.